Morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. You're very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Reports the PM and the Chancellor are at loggerheads over the economy this morning. They have much to be concerned about. The pound is tanking and some mortgage lenders are holding on to their money as interest rates are predicted to treble. If that sounds like a bad week at the office for Downing Street, it deteriorated further last night when the world's lender of last resort, that's the IMF, joined a growing backlash against last Friday's mini-budget. We'll speak to a Liz Truss supporter, Labour's Lucy Powell, the finance sector, and some of those most impacted by the cost of living crisis. It is Wednesday, the 28th of September. Sky News reveals tensions between the Prime Minister and her Chancellor over how to respond to the market tailspin caused by the budget. Interest rates are projected to rise to more than 6% by May after a warning from the Bank of England's chief economist.
And prices in the shops are going up too. New research shows that fresh food like this is up by 10%.
Also ahead, European leaders say major gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea were sabotaged and demand an investigation. Postal workers announced 19 days of strikes affecting some of the busiest shopping days of the year in the run-up to Christmas.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet
Into the stratosphere, David Bowie's handwritten lyrics for the pop classic Starman have gone under the hammer for more than £200,000. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, wherever you're watching us, right around the world, joined by best-selling author and former politician Jeffrey Archer to talk about his new book, his bond with Princess Diana, and current politics. Also,
I'm up in space. Up in space.
and then there were two, Glasgow and Liverpool, are shortlisted to host next year's Eurovision Song Contest. We'll hear from both of them about why they should win. Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. Homeowners face having to find hundreds of extra pounds every month to pay the mortgage. Experts are predicting that the Bank of England will put up interest rates to more than 6% in the coming months. And banks are pulling deals for new customers. The pressure on the government is only increasing, with the IMF joining a growing international backlash and telling the Chancellor that he should scrap his tax cuts for the high earners. And as Sky News has revealed, there are divisions in Downing Street over how to respond. Let's get more. Should be Tamara standing by in Liverpool for us. Hi, Tamara. Goodness me, it's not happy reading for anybody in Downing Street at the moment. Is it either 10 or 11?
Morning, Kay. Well, yes, the government's economic woes deepened last night with this extraordinary statement from the International Monetary Fund, basically saying that they were closely monitoring the situation in the UK and urging the government to U-turn on some of its tax cuts. Now, Sky News understands that in response to that, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor actually had a disagreement about how to respond to some of the market turmoil we've seen as a result of the changes announced in the mini-budget last Friday. You'll remember that the Treasury issued a statement intended to calm and reassure the markets by saying that the Chancellor would set out a plan to cut the debt at the end of November in 8 weeks' time. Now, Sky News understands that, in fact, the Prime Minister was initially resistant to doing that and had to be convinced that this was a good idea. I'll read you some of the statements that we've seen over the last 24 hours. The statement from the International Monetary Fund said the nature of the UK measures will likely increase inequality. The 23rd of November budget will present an early opportunity for the UK government to consider ways to provide support that is more targeted and re-evaluate the tax measures, especially those that benefit high-income earners, so telling the government to basically change course. We heard from the Treasury, who said we are focused on growing the economy to raise living standards for everyone, and the Chancellor has announced he will publish his medium-term fiscal plan on the 23rd of November, which will set out further details of the government's fiscal rules, including ensuring that debt falls as a share of GDP in the medium term. So they're going full steam ahead and saying that they will set out ways to try and reassure the markets. Now, I understand that the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, is meeting with heads of various banks today to tell them more about his plan. Bloomberg, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, those are the sort of names who will be present at this meeting he's having this morning. But perhaps more of a shoring up job needs to be done with Tory MPs who are already publicly voicing their concerns over this plan and how it comes across to voters who are, of course, deeply anxious about how they're going to pay their mortgages.
OK, thank you. Joining us now is Charles Rowe, Director of Mortgages at UK Finance. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Your boss, the CEO, said last week, as far as the budget was concerned, strong backing of the financial services sector as being the catalyst for the UK economy. So full of praise for the Chancellor. Do you think he still feels that way this morning?
I think in terms of the comments that he made at the time, yes, he does. What's happened is, of course, the markets have interpreted it in a different way, and this is where we're seeing the turmoil coming through in the mortgage markets at the moment. But what I would say is that there are plenty of mortgage products out there in the market for consumers looking to purchase a property or to move on to take a remortgage. Why
do you think the markets are wrong and that your boss is right?
I'm not saying that the markets are wrong. What I'm saying is, in terms of the comments that my boss made at the time, David Poston made at the time, was a reflection of the budget that the Chancellor announced and the steps that he was taking to help consumers in terms of the cost of living challenge they were facing, and also to make sure that the UK financial markets are an attractive place for firms to do business.
That hasn't worked, though, has it?
At this stage, the markets are interpreting it differently. We are seeing a little bit more stability coming through into the markets over the last couple of days.
Are we? In what way?
Well, in terms of the pound has firmed up against the dollar a little bit over the last couple of days.
No, it hasn't. I think it's was it 106, 107 overnight?
It was 107 overnight, but it's picked up from the 103 that it was.
103 was on the Asian markets, wasn't it? It wasn't actually here in the UK. So it's not really picked up at all, has it? And the International Monetary Fund, the lender of last resort, as we know, has stepped in to say that he's on the wrong course and he needs to change direction.
Yeah, I can't comment on the Chancellor's comment, the Chancellor's decisions at this stage, and I know that the IMF have commented overnight, and that's for something for the government to pick up rather than UK.
Yeah, but the impact on your business has been astronomical, hasn't it?
In what way?
In that people can't get mortgages. I mean, of course, there are mortgage products available, but we're seeing some of the big names like Skipton and Halifax and Virgin Money are saying, oh, we're not sure where this is going, so we're going to pull out for now, or offer different style mortgages that they didn't previously. There
are still 3,000 mortgage products available on the market. There's plenty of choice for consumers, whether they're looking to purchase a home or to remortgage at this stage. So there's certainly no shortage of mortgages. There is more mortgage on offer at this stage than there was at in the start of 2020 in the pandemic, when a similar issue occurred in relation to reduction in mortgages available in the market.
At what cost? What are the interest rates looking like? How much is it going to cost people?
In terms of taking out a new mortgage at the moment, it depends on in terms of their loan to value and in terms of the borrower. One of the things that we would say, and we would encourage all consumers, is to speak to your mortgage advisor, an independent mortgage advisor, early. If you're looking to remortgage, they will be able to find the best product for you. If you're finding that you're in financial difficulties, then we would encourage borrowers, whether it's secured or unsecured mortgage borrowing, to speak to your lender at an early stage. They stand ready to help. They've got a good experience in this, and they want to ensure that consumers get the right product for their circumstance.
Bank of England suggesting that interest rates could go up to 6%. What will that mean for mortgages?
I can't comment on what future speculation is in terms of mortgages. What I would say is that everybody who's taken out a mortgage since 2012 has been stress tested. They've had a stress test above 3% above the lender's standard variable rate, to ensure that where there is market turbulence or movement in markets, that there is an element of affordability built in there. And that's a learning from what happened before the financial crisis in 2007, 2008.
If interest rates do go up next year to, 5, 6, 7%. I'm not asking you to comment specifically on the number. What will that mean for people who have fluctuating more as opposed to fixed rate. What will that mean for people who, you know, have a mortgage that fluctuates with the market?
So in terms of someone who's on a variable rate mortgage or a tracker mortgage, one of the things that we would say is, again, always speak to your mortgage advisor to see whether there's a better product that's available for you. But in terms of the banks are there ready to help borrowers who are facing financial difficulty, and will help customers switch to a fixed rate product if that is right for them at that particular time in their circumstances.
How long have you been in the business?
In UK finance?
Yeah.
Or in UK finance, I've been here for 2.5 years. I worked in the mortgage market for over 20 years.
And how would you compare what's happening now with the rest of your career?
In terms of what I've seen before, I've seen it worse. So in terms of
when?
the late 1990s, and also in terms of after the financial crisis, when we saw a significant reduction in house prices, and also in terms of an increase in unemployment at that particular time as well.
Also, just going back to your CEO, he said further tax changes and ambitious regulatory reform are required to capitalise on this bold first move. So he wanted to see taxes cut further. One wonders what impact that would have.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on those particular issues.
Yeah, but you represent the business, so obviously.
Yes,
I mean, come on.
Yes, I represent the business, but in terms of the tax cuts that he would like to see, there would be tax cuts and changes to encourage the firms to invest in the UK and to encourage investment at all levels of the economy, to help the government in terms of their agenda in relation to levelling up, and also in terms of making sure that we have a vibrant and buoyant economy, which encourages investment both from overseas firms and also from UK firms.
So as far as UK finance is concerned, the Chancellor is on the right track?
Where UK finance sits at the moment, we are supportive of what the government is trying to do, and we are also supportive in terms of our members, in terms of our mortgage firms. As I said at the beginning, there is plenty of mortgage on offer outside, in the market at the moment, and we want to ensure that borrowers have choice, which they do have if they're looking to remortgage
even though
or
it costs them more
purchase the
money. Yeah.
That's a reflection of market economics rather than...
No, it's a reflection on what the mini budget's done.
It's in terms of where we are in terms of this current phase in the cycle, things will start to level out. We are seeing that those firms that have withdrawn their products are putting them back on the market this morning. OK, so as far as Virgin Media is concerned, as far as Halifax is concerned, I think the other one was Skipton, if I'm not wrong, they're all going to be back on the market this morning? Not necessarily those three firms. A number of firms are coming back with new products this morning and towards the end of this week as well. OK, it's great to talk to you, Charles. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Looking at the front pages for you this morning. Let's start with the Telegraph, should we? The front of the Telegraph carries a warning for the Prime Minister Liz Truss from the IMF. Reverse tax cuts is what that says, very different to what we're hearing from UK finance. Market turmoil requires tough action from BOE, its chief economist warns. That reads the front of the Financial Times for you today. The Eye leads with more on the budget backlash. PM and Kwarteng ignored officials who warned of markets turmoil, is their headline. House prices warning as loan rates rise sharply, reads the front of the Times, referencing the Credit Suisse analysis that property value may fall by 15%. And the Sun covers mortgage fears over inflation rises, as they say, bricking it. While the Guardian reads a Labour moment as Sir Keir Starmer sets out his plans for their return to power. New figures out this morning reveal more pain for consumers. The rise in prices in shops and supermarkets in Britain has hit its highest rate on record. The British Retail Consortium Nielsen IQ Index shows overall shop inflation was up almost 6% in September. Food prices are up more than 10% on last year, a rise driven partly by the war in Ukraine, which is driving up the price of things like animal feed, fertiliser and vegetable oil. And fresh food products costing a record 12.1% more than they did last year. Shingy standing by for us at a greengrocer's in Dulwich in southeast London this morning, showing us carrots at the start of the programme. We can see lots of other fresh fruit there as well, all on the up when it comes to cost. Shingy, good morning.
Good morning, Kay. That's absolutely right. Those figures are stark, and they're being driven by things like the weak pound, which we've been talking about constantly in our programming, as well as issues like energy prices and the increasing cost of transporting these lovely products that we have here at this greengrocers. And I'm joined by Matt, who is the director of Marvellous Greens and Beans, to talk a bit more about the pressures they're facing. So, Matt, tell us a bit about some of the products that have gone up in price the most.
Overall, some prices have gone up throughout the year. It's been a bit of a difficult year overall for fruit and veg and for fresh products. Stark prices have increased mostly in dairy products, so milk, cheese. We've seen them go up a few times this year, maybe even 2-3 times this year.
2-3 times more for milk?
Yeah.
What's driving that?
Often production costs, the feed for the animals, it's getting very expensive for the farmers, for the farms, and so obviously that cost comes to us. We're trying to absorb that cost as much as possible so that it doesn't go to the consumer and to the customers, but it is there.
How do the customers feel about paying way more for their basic necessities here, some of the foods that they need?
Well, as I said, we try to absorb that cost as much as possible. We very much see ourselves as a community greengrocer, so we have to take the hit a little bit. We're a bit concerned about, other costs like fuel, electricity, that's going to be coming soon. But generally, as long as we are in a good relationship with the community, they understand. They are understanding and they are supportive. But, for some people, it can be too difficult.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. So there you have it, is a picture of spiralling costs which are impacting the people selling the goods, but also the people buying the goods as well, Kay.
OK, thank you, Shingy, thank you. Well, the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, will try to reassure investment banks today after the Bank of England signals sharp interest rate rises could be on the cards. Joining us now is the Conservative MP, Sir John Redwood, and Liz Truss supporter. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Why do you think that the markets have reacted so badly to the Chancellor's mini-budget?
Well, the markets globally were reacting very badly to the Federal Reserve Board's announcement when they said they were going to hike interest rates a lot. And we saw a big blizzard of bond selling ahead of the Chancellor's announcement. And then the world speculators in currencies who had been raiding the yen and the euro in past weeks turned more of their attention to the pound. And we saw them do a sharp sell-off in the pound, which then reversed very rapidly to some extent on the Monday morning. Markets will do what markets want to do, and these are not things that governments should seek to control. Governments need to follow counter-inflation policies that work, which they didn't do in the previous 2 or 3 years, and they need to follow policies that promote growth. My message today is that the government are right to see the main threat for the year ahead as recession, not inflation, because the good news is that all the forecasters say inflation will come down a lot next year, and the sooner the better.
So how does inflation come down with interest rates going up to the extent that we are being told 6%? I know what you're going to say in response to that, and I would suggest if interest rates go up to 6%, we're going to see people not being able to afford their mortgages and having to hand back their homes.
Yes, and that would be quite a wrong policy response. And I hope the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee is wiser than some of these rumours and leaks coming out, because I don't think there's any way in which we need 6% interest rates. Their own forecasts, Bank of England's own forecasts, say that inflation will be back to 2% within a couple of years. They may be right this time with their forecasts. And I think they should be very cautious about taking more action, because they have lurched from a monetary policy that was flagrantly too permissive and very inflationary to one which is now very tight. And I think it's quite tight enough to do the job we need to do, which is to get inflation down.
Well, the Bank of England is independent, as we know, and they feel that it's necessary to stabilise the pound by increasing interest rates significantly.
Well, it's not their role or remit to stabilise the pound, and they won't be able to stabilise the pound. The pound is buffeted by huge forces in global currency markets where collectively the world traders trade far more money than the British government could throw at it. The last time we had a policy of trying to defend a particular level of the pound, it was a particularly disastrous policy. It was called the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, and it first of all gave us an inflation and then it gave us a recession. We don't want boom bust, And trying to target the currency would be a supreme error, which would do damage to our prosperity.
Not as disastrous for the pound as we're seeing at the moment, some might suggest. Do you think the Bank of England is overreacting?
Well, they haven't done anything yet, and I'm very pleased they haven't. I fully support the bank
potentially an increase in interest rates to 6%. That's what is being speculated. Do you think that would be an overreaction?
Well, that isn't a statement of the Bank of England, I'm pleased to say. The Bank of England has wisely decided it doesn't need an emergency meeting or an emergency interest rate rise. And why would they? Because, as I said, their forecasts are that inflation will come back down to target within a couple of years, and that they have already put up interest rates on several occasions in the past. More importantly, they have stopped printing money to buy bonds, which I think was one of the inflationary forces. If the Bank of England wanted to do something helpful, then they would announce that they don't need to be selling some of the bonds that they bought at very high prices at big losses. They could say to the markets, we now think the bonds are too cheap for us to want to sell any. That would be very helpful.
OK, let's talk about the International Monetary Fund then, the lender of last resort. They've also got very grave concerns overnight. Why are they wrong?
Well, the IMF were very wrong, as was the Bank of England, over the inflation which they now rightly worry about. They didn't warn us or the other central banks in the run-up to the big inflation that the monetary policies in 2021 were far too loose, that interest rates were far too low, and that money printing was getting out of control. And it's a great pity they didn't warn about that. Now they should be looking forward. And as the global forecasts point to lower inflation in America, Britain, Europe, as do the domestic forecasts, they should be saying the new threat is recession. I don't want to see people losing their jobs on a big scale and income squeezed because we're in too big a recession. We should be fighting recession. Of course, we must be prudent with finances. But the truth is that if the austerity policies have their way and we have a big recession, the borrowing won't go down. The borrowing will soar. And my fear now is the official forecasts in the United Kingdom, which for 2 years greatly exaggerated the amount of borrowing to try and encourage a high tax policy, are now underestimating the amount of borrowing we would be forced into doing because of the world slowdown.
So the Bank of England is out of step, the IMF is out of step. Let me put a story to you that I've been reading in the Sunday Times, The Guardian, other newspapers as well. Interesting to get your take on this, Sir John, if you would please, reporting that there was a group of Liz Truss supporting hedge fund managers who attended a dinner a week ago. Every one of them was shorting the pound, which means, as you know, but for the benefit of others who perhaps don't, they were betting that it would go much lower against the dollar. The paper reported several of them made small fortunes shorting the pound. The Financial Conduct Authority has been asked to investigate. Do you think they should?
Well, I know nothing of the circumstances of this alleged meal and who went, so no, I can't comment on that. If people have broken the rules or done something wrong, then of course it should be investigated, but I know no evidence of that.
But I suppose you only know if they've broken the rules if you investigate it.
Yes, but I don't even know this meal occurred, so I'm not the person to cross-examine on this, but I, like most people, don't wish to see people breaking rules, and if they have, they should be investigated.
OK. How did you feel about the latest opinion polls that we saw from YouGov over the week? Well, they was done over the weekend. We saw it yesterday. Tories 17 points behind Labour.
Well, I look forward to them improving, clearly. That wasn't a good poll. But the poll that matters, as people always say who are behind in the polls, is the one that occurs when you have a general election. I would imagine a general election is still a couple of years away, so I think a lot is going to happen before then, and I will be supporting the government every time it does things which raise the prosperity and freedoms of the British people, so that is surely the way to become more popular.
Yeah, I'm sure that Liz Truss is not going to find it mildly amusing, given that normally you do see when there's a new leader in post, they do tend to have a polling boost in the first few weeks, don't they?
Well, these are very exceptional times, aren't they? And the new Prime Minister took over against this background of global market meltdown, bonds being sold off everywhere, shares falling a lot as well, as people sifted through the truth of what I've been trying to tell you, which is that we are at that point where inflation is receding as the main problem and recession is looming. And that does require a policy change. And I therefore look forward to a rounded policy change from this government, not merely some tax rate reductions, but also measures to promote more investment, more capacity, more domestic energy, more domestic food, because we need to tackle the balance of payments deficit, and measures to get better value out of all our public spending so that we control the deficits in the right way.
OK, it's great to talk to you. We appreciate you taking the time this morning. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, we'll have more reaction to the market tailspin over the past few days that has sent the pound tumbling. Speaking to Ben Zaronka from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Charity warns that millions of people with asthma could be at risk this winter because of soaring costs. We'll speak to someone with a serious lung condition. And we'll speak to the royal commentator Robert Hardman as it emerges that there are no plans for Prince William to receive a formal investiture ceremony as Prince of Wales. In other news, European leaders have described damage to the Nord Stream gas pipe network as an act of sabotage and have demanded an investigation. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says any deliberate disruption of active European energy infrastructure is unacceptable and will lead to the strongest possible response. Joined now from Moscow by Alex Rossi. Hi, Alex. We don't know what's happened to this pipe, but there are suggestions that Russian forces might be at hand.
Yeah, it is all a bit of a mystery, and it should be said that we may never really understand what's happened. I think it is quite clear when you listen to everything that's being said by officials and security agencies in Europe that this was most likely an act of sabotage. It was an attack. Seismologists in Denmark and Sweden recorded what wasn't an earthquake. They think it was a blast, registering something like 2.3 on the Richter scale. Now, it's thought that there were 3 explosions causing 3 holes in these 2 pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Now, certainly in Europe, they are pointing the finger, some more than others. The Polish Prime Minister has pretty much said that it is the Russians that are behind this. Ukraine also has levelled that accusation at Moscow. Now, here, it's been met with strenuous denials. They say that this is nothing to do with us. They say it was an act of sabotage and needs to be investigated rigorously. So I think the big question for lots of people is who benefits from all of this? And again, it's really hard to say who exactly does benefit from it because these pipelines weren't operational. Nord Stream 1 hadn't been used since the summer and Nord Stream 2 had never come online. But there is this concept, Kay, called hybrid warfare. And it's something that the Americans, the CIA, have been warning European leaders about since the summer, saying that there could be an attack on energy infrastructure. And if you look at it through that prism, perhaps things become slightly clearer. Now, hybrid warfare are attacks that happen off the battlefield. Think about European economies like our own one. It's soft and it's open. So something that could cause a drop in the pound or the euro, for instance, could make things more difficult for people in those countries and sap the political will. Now, what's happened with this, of course, is we've seen the price of gas spike. It's already extremely high. When people across Europe are facing a cost of living crisis, there's an enormous amount of inflationary pressure, so therefore it would fit into that category. I'm not saying it is that, but that, of course, is the speculation that lots of people are making. But certainly the Kremlin here is denying that it was behind this, and the investigations continue.
OK, Alex, for now, thank you. Also making headlines for you on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News this morning, Royal Mail workers have announced that they'll strike for 19 days in October and November in a dispute over pay and conditions. The walkouts will cover peak periods such as Black Friday and the build-up to Christmas. Some 115,000 Communication Workers Union members were already preparing to walk out on Friday and Saturday after that action was revealed earlier this month. Millions of people are being urged to have the flu and COVID vaccines ahead of what is expected to be a bad flu spike this winter. Experts are warning there will be lower levels of natural immunity due to people mixing less in the last few years because of the pandemic. New analysis has found flights for half-term getaways are on average 42% more expensive than before the pandemic, with the largest rise on fares from Heathrow to Tenerife. The consumer group, which found that passengers booking 6 weeks before departure paid an average of £262 more each way than in 2019 for a family of 4. That's an extra £2,000. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Former Cabinet Minister Sir John Redwood, he's been speaking to us this morning. He's defended the government's economic policies and said the Bank of England should be very cautious about raising interest rates. Food inflation hits its highest rate on record, with fresh food products more than 12% higher than a year ago. European leaders describe damage to the Nord Stream gas pipe network as an act of sabotage and have demanded an investigation. Well, earlier I spoke to Sir John Redwood, as I was saying. He told me that inflation will be under control in the near future and that the Bank of England should be cautious about raising interest rates.
I don't think there's any way in which we need 6% interest rates. Their own forecasts, Bank of England's own forecasts, say that inflation will be back to 2% within a couple of years. They may be right this time with their forecasts. And I think they should be very cautious about taking more action, because they have lurched from a monetary policy that was flagrantly too permissive and very inflationary to one which is now very tight. And I think it's quite tight enough to do the job we need to do, which is to get inflation down.
And I also spoke in the last hour to Charles Rowe. He's the Director of Mortgages at UK Finance, the organisation which represents banks. He told me that there are still plenty of deals to go around after hundreds of deals were pulled over rate rise concerns.
There are still 3,000 mortgage products available on the market. There's plenty of choice for consumers, whether they're looking to purchase a home or to remortgage at this stage. So there's certainly no shortage of mortgages. One of the things that we would say, and we would encourage all consumers, is to speak to your mortgage advisor, an independent mortgage advisor, early. If you're looking to remortgage, they will be able to find the best product for you. If you're finding that you're in financial difficulties, then we would encourage borrowers, whether it's secured or unsecured mortgage borrowing, to speak to your lender at an early stage. They stand ready to help. They've got a good experience in this, and they want to ensure that consumers get the right product.
Well, joining us now is Senior Research Economist at the Institute for Fiscal Studies. That's Ben Zaranko. Hi, Ben. Good to see you. What's your take on what's happening at the moment?
Well, I think that lots of market investors and increasingly international institutions, we've heard from the IMF today, are thinking that there's a bit of a credibility gap in the government's economic plans and its economic strategy. The government took a major gamble last week with its plans. It's effectively betting the house on growth, and it's gambling that its package of tax cuts and some rather vague promised supply side reforms to the economy will deliver substantially higher growth and make the sums add up. And I think what you've got is markets taking a look, looking at the government's plans for the public finances, looking at the political challenges around, for example, reforming planning or making it easier to deliver large infrastructure projects, and concluding that they just don't buy it. And that's why you're seeing the falling pound, you're seeing much higher costs of borrowing for the government in the form of higher gilt yields. And all that adds up to a rather unattractive economic picture, and there's a risk of this exacerbating the economic challenges the UK faces. And a lot rests on the government delivering a credible and convincing medium-term fiscal plan next month. It's promised that for the 23rd of November. And I think a lot is riding on that. We'll want to see a credible plan where the sums, at least an attempt to make the sums add up, we didn't even get that last week, to try and convince markets, to convince people who are lending the government money that they've got things in hand.
Just been hearing from a backbench Tory MP who was saying that the Bank of England need to keep their mitts off the pound, or trying to get the pound to bounce back. That's not their remit. Also hearing from one of the guys who represents mortgage and loan lenders, saying that basically his boss was saying that the government should double down on more tax cuts.
Well, we have an independent Bank of England, and I think one thing that potentially markets might be worried about is the prospect of the fiscal authorities leaning on the Bank of England and trying to through whatever pressure they can bring, discourage them from increasing interest rates to the level they see appropriate. The bank's job is to try and bring inflation back down to target. That's what they're tasked with, and that's what they'll do. I don't think it's especially helpful for government authorities to be trying to interfere with that task. Kwasi Kwarteng said last week that the independence of the Bank of England is sacrosanct. And I think that in terms of whether more tax cuts are on the way, we had the Chancellor promise over the weekend that there's more to come. But at the moment, we're already set to see borrowing stay extremely high, well above £100 billion into the medium term, right through beyond the rest of this parliament. And there are forecasts for the economy and the public finances that would see debt on a steadily rising path. The Chancellor's promised that debt will be falling as a share of national income. So what we need now is a plan for how that's going to happen. More tax cuts, I'm afraid, aren't going to make that more difficult. Instead, he might have to be thinking about whether, unless he can secure a miraculous increase in the rate of growth, are we looking at rolling back on some of those tax cuts? Are we looking at a painful package of spending cuts at some point in the next few years? There are no easy ways out of this. You can't just assume your way to fiscal responsibility. What we'd like to see is a chance to grasp the nettle, recognise some of the trade-offs involved, and try and re-establish the credibility of the UK's fiscal regime.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that has caught the headlines is the cutting of the top rate of interest from 45 of a tax, I should say, from 45 to 40%. Actually, that only amounts to about £2 billion. I suppose it depends which side of the fence you're on as to whether that was a good idea or not.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of the public finances, £2 billion is neither here nor there. I think it's more a question of, clearly there's political judgments about whether that's a good move or not, but I think it's more a question of priorities and a question of why are you injecting demand into the economy at a time when the Bank of England is trying to offset any additional demand. But also this argument that they're making that these cuts to the top rate of income tax will contribute to a much faster economic growth rate for the UK. And I think the evidence is rather thin on the ground for that. And I think that that's what people don't buy, is that this package of tax cuts is going to be enough to turn around the UK's rate of meagre economic growth just by taking taxes back to where they were, say, 2 years ago. And I think people just don't buy that, and the evidence just isn't there to support it. And that's why I think there's been such a negative reaction from some parts of financial markets.
Just a thought on the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, who basically analysed the figures and talked to us about them, either explain them or otherwise. Do you think if they had been asked for their analysis alongside this mini budget, then potentially the government might not have been in the pickle it's in?
I think it certainly would have helped. It's a sort, as much as anything else, markets are governed by emotions and by a sense of direction and a sense of, if you like, for a better word, the vibes coming off the government. And I think sacking the Treasury's top civil servant, saying you don't want a new set of forecasts for the economy or the public finances, even though the OBR had said that there was one available and ready to publish, all of that gives a sense of a desire to avoid scrutiny and avoid what you might call expert opinion, although it's of course not beyond criticism. And so I think that it perhaps might have helped. It would have at least said on the government's own forecasts, it would have almost certainly been on track to have much higher borrowing and debt rising as a share of the economy. And the government would have been forced to grapple with that fact. It might have then forced it to have some sort of more credible plan how to deal with that in the medium term. Just ignoring it and brushing it under the carpet, I think that's what seems to have panicked some parts of the financial markets.
Great to talk to you. Thanks a lot, Ben. What impact what's going on at the moment in the markets has on people day to day? Well, the health charity Asthma and Lung UK has warned that the cost of living crisis is leading to patients cutting back on medicine, heating and food. The charity warned there could be a tidal wave of hospital admissions. Joining us now is Ron Flewitt, who lives with a serious lung disease, and his wife Maxine, who is Ron's carer. Hello to you both. Thank you for joining us on the programme. Ron, how are you feeling this morning, first of all?
Well, I'm feeling a bit nervous, to be honest with you, Kay, but I'm feeling fine. I'm feeling, fine.
Oh, don't be nervous. You're only talking to me. Talk to me about your condition and the impact we've seen over the last few weeks and months with the cost of living crisis. What impact is that having on you both?
Well, my condition is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, and it's scarring of the lungs. And as you can see, I'm on permanent oxygen. The impact of the energy crisis will be quite, what's the word I'm looking for, Doug?
Immensely significant.
Immensely significant. You know, I said yesterday in the reports, when I was working full time and I was forced to go part time, I adjusted to my reduced wage. But now the impact of the energy crisis, we can't adjust to that figure, and I have to keep this house at a constant temperature due to my lung condition.
Yeah, I get that. Maxine, there is a limit, isn't there, a price cap on energy bills? The government has set that at £2,500 for 2 years. How will that help you?
Well, it's a little bit better than it was going to be, but to be honest, it's still over doubling the bills we have, and that means we have to decide whether we keep warm and don't eat, or cut down on what we're eating, or freeze and eat. Now, with Ron being on the lung transplant list and his disease, any cold in the winter can cause an infection, which could cause him to be hospitalised, which could cause him to lose his life. So to us, this is an extremely serious issue. Now,
Asthma and Lung UK, I know that you have quite a lot to do with that charity, don't you? And they've helped you in the past. What are they saying? What have they asked the government to do to try to help people like you and Ron?
I think the thing that they're asking is for the government to consider people that are in our situation, where you don't have a choice, you have no other way of making any more money to come into your budget. So you are stuck. So you need help and support to take the pressure off the hospitals, to enable people to be able to live a comfortable life. We're not asking for a luxurious life. We're just asking to keep to a reasonable level of warmth and to be able to eat at a reasonable level, not having to choose between one or the other. And there's many people out there like that.
Sure, I get that. Ron, Maxine was saying you're on the transplant list.
Yes, I've been on the active list for double lung transplant for a year now, so my life could change either today, tomorrow, next week. I get that call and I will be taken to hospital for a double lung transplant. So keeping away from infections, keeping me warm is very important to us, because as Maxine said, if I got an infection, it could, one, reduce my lung capacity, or worse, it could actually cause me, it could cause end of life.
Yeah, and you need to watch out for that dreaded COVID, don't you, as well, and the flu, which we're being told might be a bit of a problem this winter. Ron, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 61.
61, same age as me. And you tend to need to stay at home, do you, most of the time, or can you go out and about?
No.
In winter, we become hermits because the cold weather has a massive impact on Ron. Even just walking out the door will cause a massive coughing fit. So we tend to have to hibernate, and that's what makes this even worse, because we have to stay in and we have to keep him at a constant temperature. So that puts more of an impact on us having to keep the place warm. It's not like we can go out a lot and go somewhere else to keep warm. We can't. We're like hermits.
I understand, Maxine. And I know that they listen and watch us in Number 10. What would you like to say to them this morning?
I would like to say, I think once again, you have to consider the severely vulnerable people in this country. You've done it before, and I think you need to do it again. You want to keep the hospitalisations down. You want to protect the older people and the sick and poorly people, and you have to consider those people once again, because we are in a vulnerable position once again in our lives that is putting added pressure on a lot of people.
Okay. Maxine and Ron, see, I told you didn't need to be nervous. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. You eloquently put your case there. Thanks a lot, much appreciated.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Let's look at other news now, should we? Hurricane Ian looks like it's strengthening into a Category 4 storm as it approaches Florida. The hurricane has already knocked out power across all of Cuba and devastated some of the country's most important tobacco farms. Martha has more in Florida with the latest.
Businesses here on this part of the west coast of Florida are preparing to close for the last time before Hurricane Ian arrives. It's expected to make landfall towards the end of this evening into the early hours of tomorrow morning, and people have been inside this supermarket buying last-minute, last-ditch supplies, things like canned goods and ice, anything that can see them through the impact of Hurricane Ian, but potentially the next few days as well, because people don't know the level of destruction that this storm will bring. And it's not just the wind, the immediate impact of the hurricane, it's also the water that they fear most here. A reasonable worst case scenario for this area of Tampa Bay is a storm surge of up to 10 feet. Just to put that in context, 3 feet of water makes houses unlivable. 6 feet is far taller than I am, and 10 feet for many people in this area is almost unthinkable. It's been over 100 years since the last major hurricane made landfall in Tampa, so certainly preparations ongoing here. And you can see the windows here boarded up. Many people have been buying sandbags, fearful of the water impact. So people here hoping for the best, but certainly preparing for the worst.
OK, thank you. Now, a group of women in Berlin have come up with a new way of raising funds for Ukraine. Let's have a look, should we? They are donating their wedding dresses to a pop-up store, with all the proceeds going to organisations supporting women in the war-torn country. Dresses for Ukraine has collected over 90 unique garments that will be auctioned off and sold online to hopefully raise tens of thousands of euros. Good for them. Dresses look great as well, don't they? And all for a good cause. No plans were being told for Prince William to receive a formal investiture ceremony as Prince of Wales, an honour previously granted to his father back in 1969. Why? Let's talk to Daily Mail journalist and author of Queen of Our Times, and that's Robert Hardman, of course. Hi, Robert. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Why are they not doing an investiture, do you think?
Well, as we understand, Kay, at the moment, there are no plans for one. I mean, that could obviously change, but I think there's a sense that times have moved on. When Prince Charles had his investiture in 1969, he was very young. It was the dawn of colour television, would you believe? And there was a sense that the royal family needed to be in the sort of forefront of this new medium. It was around exactly the same time as the first royal documentary was shown as well. And there was a sense that, you know, this should be a sort of a ceremony that blended ancient and modern. It was the first made-for-TV royal ceremony. And the government of the day were right behind it. They were very keen to head off a rising sense of Welsh nationalism, and they thought this would be the way to do it. It was very much driven, as I said, by Downing Street, by the Welsh office. We don't really hear any noises about this from the current Downing Street, current Welsh office, or Welsh Ministry and the Senedd. There's no appetite to have a big sort of jamboree. So I suspect Prince William, as we used to know him, Duke of Cambridge, as we used to know him, now Prince of Wales, quite happy to be Prince without filling a castle and putting on robes and going through a sort of medieval pageant.
Yeah, Duke of Cambridge and Duke of Cornwall, and now also Prince of Wales. As you were saying, this is his first official visit as Prince of Wales yesterday, after the royal family came out of their extra week of mourning. Although, you know, Wales is no stranger, is it, to this couple? They were in Anglesey, lived in Anglesey for a while.
Yes, I mean, their married life began in Wales. They have a great love of it. Prince William, as he was born, was always going to be Prince of Wales one day. And I think there's a sort of, it's a two-way thing. It's not a case of the couple having any sort of jurisdiction over Wales. It's a very ancient traditional title. But it sort of helps sort of promote Wales. You know, he's already, you know, spent a lot of time there. The married life began there. He's a very active patron of the Welsh Rugby Football Union. Goes to Welsh Rugby a lot. There are a lot of connections, but those connections are now going to increase. I think we'll see more of the couple in Wales. They'll be there more often with the children as well. But I think there's an authenticity to William. I don't think he wants any sort of synthetic sudden pretense that he's become Welsh. He's not suddenly going to start speaking Welsh or spending vast amounts of time there. It's an honour. It's an ancient title. And as I said, it's good for Wales. It means Wales will get a bit more profile, and it ties in this couple with their birthright, with the sort of tradition going back centuries.
Let's talk about his brother briefly. There is a book that we are looking forward to. I'm sure the family is as well, with some trepidation. Reports that Harry is trying to hastily rewrite parts of it following the death of his grandmother. What do you know?
Well, so it is reported, that he feels that after the funeral of the Queen, and I think also to an extent after the Platinum Jubilee celebrations of the summer, that perhaps this book that we are told is going to contain many truths, his truths, that perhaps that there are the signs of a sort of thawing in the rift between the Sussexes and the palace, and I think the Duke wisely doesn't want to burn any bridges. It is tricky. I mean, having written one or two books myself, once the manuscript's in, you can't suddenly start making changes at the last minute if the thing is already at the printers. So he may find that there are constraints on what can be changed. But as we don't know when the book was due to come out anyway, maybe that's easier. My feeling is that there's been a lot of speculation that he's going to cause, he's going to upset members of the family. I think the book will be very hard-hitting on the media. I think it'll be pretty hard-hitting on a lot of the palace authorities, the officials, the grey men in suits, as Harry sometimes called them. I think he's, wise enough not to want to blow things up completely with the family. The scenes there, you're seeing, the Sussexes and the Cambridges together at that walkabout shortly after the death of the Queen, and I think the sort of direction of travel from all the sad events of recent days points to a sort of gentle warming. I mean, I don't think anyone's suddenly expecting a great reunion, but
no,
but it's heading in that direction.
Yeah. We must leave it there. Rob, it's great to talk to you as always. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time. Much appreciated. Thank you.